last week we began speaking about the places where Sefer Moshe is quoted, and it's referring to Sefer Dvarim, which Reb Yaakov felt was a very good proof to his idea that Sefer Dvarim, when it says Sefer Moshe, it's actually something Moshe wrote as opposed to Sefer Torah's Moshe, right? Because in Baba Basra it says like Moshe Kosav Sifro. So here it says Sefer Moshe as opposed to Sefer Torah's Moshe. So there's actually, if I'm not mistaken, there's 3 or 4 places, maybe even 4 places. Reb Yaakov discusses 3 of them. I think the 4th place is actually in Ezra in Aramaic. It says Sefer Moshe in Aramaic, but I think everything else will get answered once you answer a few of these. They'll all get answered. So the first one Reb Yaakov spoke about was, one he didn't have to talk about because it says in Sefer Nehemiah or Ezra that Kakosu b'Sefer Moshe Loyovo Amoni U'Moavi B'Kal Hashem. And it's referring to Sefer Dvarim because the Inyan of Moavi and Ammoni, I think Michael wrote about this as well, is referring to Sefer Dvarim that we all know. That's where those psukim are. So, and the second one he spoke about, which we read through last week, was Vespaneim lo heimis kakosu b'Torah b'Sefer Moshe, right? And there it also says lo yomsu avos al banim, banim lo yomsu al avosam, right? So that's also in Sefer Dvarim, clearly. The only thing is that Reb Yaakov here brought sort of a raya to himself, and then he ruined it. Okay. I don't know what his intention was, but I asked Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky about it, and we'll talk about it in a second. This is all parenthetic. He brings the Sforno in the pasuk V'yomsu avos al banim in Sefer Dvarim, and the Sforno says, using this pasuk in Divrei Yamim and in Malachim, same story in both places, says that you see that V'yomsu avos al banim is going on the Melech. Because the Melech Amatzi didn't kill the guy's family, because lo yumsu avos al banim. So even though he killed the guy for killing his father, right? But he didn't kill the children. Because what's telling me is a morid b'malchus, even by the other kingdoms, the Sforno says by the other kingdoms they kill the children for obvious reasons, but by the Torah demands you don't kill the children. Okay, the Torah is very liberal. You don't kill the children. In any event, Reb Yaakov could have stopped right there and said, "That's it." What does Reb Yaakov do? Reb Yaakov says that you see in Sefer Shmuel, and it's a good raya by Mephibosheth, right? Mephibosheth says to David, after David comes back from being chased from Avshalom, and Avshalom is killed, and David comes back as being king. Mephibosheth says, that we were all anshe movis ladoni hamelech. We're all people who were chayiv the death penalty, right? We're all dead people to dead men, right? So Rabbi Yaakov says, you see, in Judaism we have it also. Well, of course, then that's disagreeing with the Sforno. Because the Sforno says, because of Morid B'Malchus, you're not allowed to kill the kids. And you see that Mephibosheth said, we were all obligated, right? Kol Beisavi Kiyim Anshe Movetz Ladoni Amelech, right? So Rabbi Yaakov has to go on to a new thing, what that pasuk is referring to. It's not referring to Morid B'Malchus, because that the king's allowed to kill the kids. It's referring to Din Malchus. When a king kills, and I remember Wayne brought this up last week, that when a king kills Din Malchus, he could kill with Eid Echad, he could kill with Al Hatra'ah. Wayne used a certain language that I forget what the language he used on this type of, when the king takes this type of power. What?
I also don't remember.
But you remember he used a certain word. I forget what it was. And then I showed you in the Rambam, in Hilchos Sanhedrin, the Rambam says that Yoshua killed Achan midin Malchus, and David killed the Ger Amaleki midin Malchus, because Ger Amaleki he told him he killed Shaul. It's al piatzmo, and Achan there was no witnesses to the Achen thing. He heard it from God. So he killed him. He did Malchus. So Reb Yaakov says over here where he killed him, he did Malchus, this guy. So that's where the Torah says, Lo yumsu avos albanim, abam yumsu avosa. Okay, so it's two different dinim in Malchus. So Reb Yaakov's being mechalik. He doesn't talk it out. Unfortunately, Reb Yaakov didn't get into this. I spoke to Reb Yosef, and he said I discussed it with my father, Zichron Levracha, and it looks like Reb Yaakov brings this forward, but then disagrees with him through the pasuk in Shmuel. By the way, it's a great pasuk in Shmuel. I don't deny that it sounds like Reb Yaakov is right. That by Morid b'Malchus, it sounds like you're allowed to kill the kids. Unless you learn that all he meant was he meant to say as if we're all chayiv misa, or we would be chayiv misa if you weren't a Jewish king or something like that. You could fetch it in order to answer the sforno, because it's a raya against the sforno. This pasuk in David. I didn't look up how the Das Mikra. I have to look up how the Das Mikra learns the pasuk. If he learns like Reb Yaakov. That it's referring to that Morid b'Malchus, you can kill the kids. I'm curious to see how they would learn it. I don't think the other Mefarshim to really discuss it. This idea of Morid b'Malchus is the kids are also Chayiv Misa. I don't think like the standard Rashi, Radak, Ralbag, discuss it. But I'll check the Bezrat Hashem. I'll check the Das Mikra. But in any event, that's what Reb Yaakov did. Now, if we go back to page Taf Ayin Aleph, okay, that's from last week, not the stuff I gave you this week, from last week. Taf Ayin Aleph, okay. That's Chelik Sheni of Reb Yaakov Tanach, Divrei Hayamim. So on Taf Ayin Aleph, Reb Yaakov now goes to the third place, which says Sefer Moshe, but it doesn't say Sefer Dvarim. Okay, we don't. I shouldn't say that. It does. It says Sefer Moshe, but we don't know exactly what is referring to in Sefer Dvarim. Okay, the other two places we know clearly, both are Psukim and Sefer Dvarim. But here, if we take a look, Tafayim Alf Eloshadayin Aleinu Levaer Mashakasim Lahalon, what it says further in Divrei Hayamim, Lamed Hey Yud Beis Yud Gimel, Vayasiru Ha'ole L'Teitam L'Miflagot L'Beit Avot L'Vnei Ha'am. So you know what? Let me just open up a Tanach for you, because you have to know a little bit of the context over here. Reb Yaakov doesn't give us the context, but in Lamed Hey, okay, in Lamed Hey, Divrei Hayamim Beis Lamed Hey, it says like this. It says, right, it's towards the end of Divrei Hayamim, mamash almost the end, right? Vayas Yoshio, I'm just reading from the text. You don't have the text in front of it. Vayas Yoshio b'Yerushalayim Pesach LaHashem v'yishchatu ha'Pesach b'Arbas Chodesh HaRishon. Okay? And Yoshio decided to make in Yerushalayim a Pesach LaHashem, which is very interesting, because why is the Melech making Pesach LaHashem? God commanded to make Pesach. He's making a Pesach over here. What is he inviting them to a hotel and a guest speaker? Those guys, the guest speakers, they come. They get the free Pesach, but they have to give 5 shiurim, right? So Vayas Yoshio Yerushalayim Pesach LaHashem v'yishchatu ha'Pesach b'Arbas Chodesh HaRishon Vayamed kakohanim al mishmarosam vayachaskem lavodas beiskel, and he put the kohanim to work. Okay, so in pasuk Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, which Reb Yaakov is quoted, v'yasiro la l'sitam lemiflagot, which is great. That's where we get the idea of miflagot. Miflagot are different groups in the Knesset, right?
Political party.
What? Political
parties.
Yeah, exactly. But here it's a little bit different. Now, the way everyone understands this pasuk is, and he removed that which has to be brought up, meaning the Kohen has to remove, or Levi has to remove parts of the Pesach that have to be brought up on the Mizbeach, that you're not allowed to eat. L'miflagot l'beitz avot l'vnei ha'am. For the miflagot are the different groups of Beit Avot for the nation, because there were batim. In the Pesach you join a bayit, so to speak. Like Rivla Hashem, in order that he removed this stuff that has to be brought up. Like Rivla Hashem kakosav b'sefer Moshe, like it says in Sefer Moshe, v'chela bakar, and he did it for the bakar too. Okay, the Kohanim did it for the Pesach, and did it for the Seh, for I guess because it says Chela Bakar means that they not only did they do it for the lamb, they did it for the Bakar. Now Bakar is not a Pesach. You can't bring Pesach from a cow, only from a Seh, from a lamb, right? So Chem Bakar means there were other korbanos as well that they were bringing, like a Chagiga. You bring the Chagiga also for the Yontif. Okay.
So where in Sefer Devarim do we have such a thing?
Okay, so that's exactly the point. Now Reb Yaakov gets into trouble, right? Because it's according to everybody else, you just go looking in Sefer Vayikra or Sefer Shmos, where you talk about Pesach, or Sefer Vayikra, you talk about Korbanos, right? Reb Yaakov was saying Sefer Moshe means Devarim. Now, by the way, I did look at the Das Mikra, and I didn't look up what he brings, but the Das Mikra says, like it says in Vayikra, Book of Vayikra, chapter Yitzayin, Pasuk Dalet, and chapter Yitches, right? He brings all the stuff from Vayikra, because that's where Korbanos are, right? So Reb Yaakov raises the question on himself, right?
You have in Parshat Re'eh, you have Pesach mentioned, but not the Korbanot.
So this is where Reb Yaakov is going to get very creative over here. Two ways of getting creative. Complicated, and unfortunately Reb Yaakov decided not to be marach here. Like he'll tell you what he thinks, and goodbye, Charlie, right? He needed to really explain it much more. One time, I don't know if I could say it here, but one time I was sitting by Rav Soloveitchik in a shiur, and he says, for tomorrow, I want you to prepare the Rambam on Hilchas Maimrim. Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim, we were learning Sanhedrin, Eila Nachnokim, and he said, like, you should prepare the Reb Chaim on it. And then he says like this, you won't understand it, but I'll explain it to you tomorrow. That's what he says. Now, we know that Rav Soloveitchik had the Ksav Yad of Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim originally wrote his Ksav Yad. He wrote it out, and then he made it shorter and shorter and shorter until Rav Soloveitchik could say, you won't understand, but I'll explain it to you. And that's what he did the next day, right? But he had the Ksav Yad. He used to look back to see how Reb Chaim originally wrote it before he was makatzeret to who knows what, to every word counts, so to speak. So Reb Yaakov does that a lot as well. So sometimes I heard things from Reb Yaakov, so I was able to tell you over. Here I didn't hear this from Reb Yaakov. I don't remember him ever telling me this part. Right? He just told me that Sefer Moshe, every time it's listed in Tanach, you'll see it Sefer Devarim. Okay, so here Reb Yaakov says, on the next pasuk, in pasuk Yud Gimel, it says like this: Vayivashlu haPesach ba'esh kamishpat va'kodashim bishlu basirot badvadim uvatzelachot vayiritzu l'chol bnei adam. Right. So it says, Harei gam kan nisku sefer Moshe v'dinei haPesach l'chol makom b'sefer Shmos, and dinei haPesach is like the exact question that we raised in Sefer Shmos. It's not in Sefer Dvarim, even though it is listed in Sefer Dvarim. But Tzarech Loma, the Koi Amashikos LeBeit Avot. Okay, you have to say that the pasuk is going on when it says they took off the parts to burn on the mizbeach, right? Lemaflagot LeBeit Avot. Kakosa b'sefer Moshe, it's going back. It's going back on Beit Avot. Okay, the Hainish is Chalcha Kohanim LeBeit Avot. Huska b'dvarim Yud Ches Ches. The fact that the Kohanim were divided into Bate Avos, right? That there were 24 Mishmarot. In time of the Chazal, in time of the Torah, they weren't taught. The Gemara in Tainus, I think, says originally it was 8 Mishmarot Aaron made 8, then Shmuel made 16, then David made 24. And Sefer Divrei Yom, David lists of 24 Mishpachot Kahuna that became the Mishmarot that used to come to Yerushalayim. Each one had a week in Yerushalayim, and the family used to divide it up. Within the Mishmar, there was family, and they used to divide it up. The Hainush is Chalka Kol Lubatei Avos, Husker B'Sefer Dvarim, and that's in Sefer Dvarim. 1 second. Sefer Dvarim, Yud Ches Ches. Okay, so he says that's what it means. Kakosu B'Sefer Moshe, right? Is that they had that Vayisiru Ola Tatum Lemiflagot Lebeit Avot Levnei Ha'am Lakriv Lashem Kakosu B'Sefer Moshe. It's not the Pashup shot. In other words, he's saying it's going. The second shot he's going to say is better. This he's saying is going back on Beit Avot, and Beit Avot is actually in. It says like this: "V'chiyavo alevi me'achad sharecha mikol Yisrael asher hu gar sham u'bo avas nafsho makom asher yivchar Hashem v'sheres b'shem Hashem elokav." One of the Bnei Levi. Now, if you look in the Rashi here, he brings the Chazal. Yochel b'Bnei Levi v'adei akos v'dava tamaloma v'sheres yotze levim she'ena ruyim l'sherus. In other words, it's really the Kohanim. It's the Shevet Levi, Kohanim from Shevet Levi. So there it says, Chelek Chelek Yochelu Levad Mimkarov Al Ha'ovos. And here, from here, this pasuk Chazal Rashi brings it that they used to that there were mishmarot, right? There were batei avos that used to divide things. So Rashi says, "Kechelu kechelu kechelu malamet shecholkim ba'oros ubepsar seirei chatos yochol af bedvar mabom shalomach masaregel." I would think even things lomach motmidim musafim darman adavos tamaloma levadmi mimkarav al ha'ovos chutz mimasha machru ha'ovos. We made David u'Shmuel shenikva mishmaros u'machru zelazeh tol atav shabbatcha v'ani tol shabbati. In other words, they call it memkarav, which is referring to the avos, the Kohanim used to they divided. Rashi says in the time of David and Shmuel, they made mishmarot, and they used to sell each other the weeks. You take week 1, I'll take, you take the first week of Cheshvan, I'll take the second week of Cheshvan, you'll take the third week. That's what it means. They sold each other the weeks. So he says, here is the source for according to Rashi, meaning according to Chazal, Rashi brings Chazal that Batei Avos are, the Batei Avos was is Shayach to Dvarim, and therefore it says Kakosov. The question is, why is it Shaykh to Malchus? That would be a question. Why is it Shaykh to Malchus? But it does say that David was the one who created the 24 Mishmaros. David, it said Sefer Divrei Yom. So David Hamelech created. Why it is that way, we don't know. Why didn't the Kohen Gadol create it, right? But it does say that David made the Mishmaros. So Reb Yaakov just relies upon the fact that David HaMelech made the Mishmaros, and that's why it's in Sefer Dvarim, to tell the Melech to see he's in charge of it. Why? Reb Yaakov doesn't really explain why, and the pasuk doesn't really explain why. But that's
Reb Shurin?
Yeah.
I want to understand in the context of that pasuk that I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
In Lamed Hey, it's that pasuk does not mention the Pesach. The Pesach is mentioned in the pasuk before.
Right.
This pasuk Yud Bet says, "Vayisiru ha'olah l'titan lemiflagot lebeit avot livnei ha'am lakriv lashem kakatu b'sefer Moshe." This is talking about whatever it is that's written in Sefer Moshe is something that doesn't have to do with the Kohanim per se, nor with the Pesach. It has to do dafka within the Am, the non-Kohanim, the Beit Avot. So, like,
1 second.
what's
Let me check
what's
it
the
out.
pasuk talking about?
1 second. That was in Sefer Divrei Yamin, right?
Lamed Hey Yud Bet.
Right, Lamed Hey Yud Bet. Hold on.
Isn't the Beit Avot the Kohanim?
No, not in the context of that pasuk.
And that pasuk, it's the, what do you call it?
The people. The Beit Avot Livnei Ha'am. Vayasiru ha'olav letitam lamiflagot. The Beit Avot Livnei Ha'am.
Right.
It's not talking about the Kohanim Davka. It's not talking about the Mishmarot.
Let me check the pasuk. You said Lamed Hey pasuk Yud
Bet.
Bet. Yisrael Lasitam with Beit Avot. Lasitam is, I think you're right. It's the Pesach. 1 second.
The Pesach is mentioned in the pasuk before and the pasuk after. But this pasuk is not talking. It's talking about an olah.
So it's not actually speaking about the Pesach itself.
Which I also don't
I'm talking about the Kohanim, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, what olah is given to the Am anyway? The olah is not given to the Am. The olah is not even given to the Kohanim.
No. It doesn't mean that. You're right. That the Mefarshim already say. If you take a look, I'm going to look at the translation over here. But all the Mefarshim say this. They remove the parts that were to be offered up in order to give the flesh of the Pesach offering to the family groups of the populace, to offer them up before Hashem, and is written, right, in the book of Moses, right, in the book of Moshe, and similarity for the cattle, right. To offer them up before Hashem means the emurim, right, the stuff that has to be burned, right. So they remove parts that were to be offered up, right? They remove parts that to be offered up. That's what you're right. The way the pasuk sounds, it doesn't sound like that, right? It sounds like an ola, right? Vayisiru ha'ola. No. Vayisiru means, and they remove the thing that needs to be brought up, the ola, the stuff that needs to be brought up. That's the way all the Mefarshim learn, in order to give the flesh. But you're right that the Batei Avos is referring to in order to give the flesh of the Pesach offering to the family groups of the populace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me just check again how Reb Yaakov is saying it. I'll tell you what I think Reb Yaakov means here. Again, you know where the Gemara discusses the Mishmoros and Ma'amodos in Tanis. There's right in Tanis, right? I don't remember what chapter 3. I don't remember exactly, right? But over there's a famous Mishnah that discusses that they made mishmoros and keneged them they made ma'amados, right? In other words, the ma'amados were made neged the mishmoros, meaning that because you weren't allowed to bring a korban. If I remember correctly, you weren't allowed to bring a korban tamid without. Over there, it says like. The Baalim has to be there. So since the korban tamid was for the Klal Yisrael, you had to have people Yisraelim there. So they divided the Jewish people into 24 parts, and the people who lived in Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken, that's the way the Rishonim learned. People who lived in Jerusalem used to come, and the people who didn't live in Jerusalem from the Ma'amodos used to fast and daven. But the people who lived in Jerusalem used to come and stand there because you can't bring a korban without the Baalim, right, being there. So if they're shechting for the Jewish people, they have to have the Baalim, so they have to have representatives over there. So they had 24 Ma'amodos connected to 24 Mishmaros, right? So Reb Yaakov is saying that the Mishmaros are discussed in Sefer Dvarim, and from there they made the Ma'amodos, right, that divided all the Jewish people into 24 parts. Okay, so even though Wayne is right that the pasuk is not talking about the Kohanim, right, but it's talking about Batei Avos that were divided according to the Mishmaros of the Kohanim. That's the way it's divided. I think that's what Reb Yaakov means over here. I'm not 100% sure. Okay, because he says the Klal Mashikos base Avos. That is Chakla Kohanim leBatei Avos Huska b'dvarim. The Kohanim, but Wayne is saying, well, we're not talking about Kohanim here, we're talking Yisraelim. So the only way I can figure it out is Reb Yaakov is saying that's where we get the idea of avos from, because that's where we see there was an idea of mishmaros. According to Chazal, they learned it out from those psukim in Dvarim, and that's why you have the batei avos over here that were divided into 24 parts, right? Normally, we learn base avos can mean a lot more than 24. It could be a lot of families, but that's the way Reb Yaakov seems to be learning, and that's going back on Dvarim. That's his first shot. I like the second shot better. Let's take a look at the second. Od yeshloma the koya masha kosa b'sefer dvarim tes zayin beis v'zavach the pesach tzonu bakar shemizeh yalfina shetzorach lakriv chagiga im pesach. In other words, Rashi over there learns the name of Chazal. It says zavachta pesach tzonu bakar. Wait a minute. You're not zover pesach bakar. Rashi says you're not allowed to use it. Right, you're not allowed to use a cow. So Rashi says, "Yalfina shetzorach lakriv chagiga ma pesach." In other words, in case the group is so large that you can't eat the pesach ala sova because you're going to get too small of a pesach, so you eat the chagiga before the pesach. That was the idea to do the pesach. So that's what it says in the pasuk. Zavach the pesach tzonu bakar. Shemizeh yalfinu shetzorach lakriv chagiga im pesach. Pirish Rashi sham. Umikiven the mefurish sham shekibla kohanim chelik mea korban. The kohanim got a chelik from the korban. Varleilo kiblu klum korban pesach. Shenechel kulo ala bailim. For korban pesach, the kohanim didn't get anything. Only the chabura ate the pesach. Ubehechrach mashekiblu mikorban chagiga v'lachein hisker sefer Moshe misham yalfin inyan chagiga. That's why it says in Sefer Divrei Hayamim, right? Vayisiru ola sito mafla, right? Chola lakriv lakosa b'sefer Moshe v'chein labakar. Kakosa b'sefer Moshe v'chein labakar. Right?
But according to this Perisheni, according to what Yaakov is saying, is the Kakasuba Sefer Moshe is going on the fact that the Kohanim got a chelik of the Bakar. And if that's true, then the word order isn't correct. It should say Lakriv Lashem, V'chein LaBakar Kakasuba Sefer Moshe.
Well, or you could, he might be learning Livnei Amul Lakriv Lashem. Kakasuv Mamei Sefer Moshe V'chein LaBakar. Right? The question is, what is the trop over there, right? Do you know what the trop is?
But he's saying that the Kakasuba Sefer Moshe is coming to describe why the Kohanim got from the Bakar.
Right.
According to the second Perush.
They had to do a chagiga as well. Right? So you're saying, you're right. It would have been better if it would have said, one second. If it would have said, Livnei Am Lakriv LaHashem Kakosu B'Sefer V'chein LaBakar Kakosu B'Sefer Moshe. That's what you're saying, Wayne, right?
Right.
So V'chein LaBakar Kakosu B'Sefer Moshe. Right? One second. Let me just see what it says there. Kakosu B'Sefer Moshe V'chein LaBakar V'yabashla Pesach page. Shemizeh finish the tzarch like a chagiga in a pesach, umikiv and the mafurish sham. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's difficult. It's difficult because the way he's learning it again. Let me just check the trup over there. The trup over there is because it should say it says snachte after Sefer Moshe, right? Kakosu b'Sefer Moshe. V'chein LaBakar, so it's hard to learn. Kakosu Sefer Moshe v'chein LaBakar. Yeah, it's difficult. It's really difficult to say this. Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky has a lot of comments on here, so I didn't really go through the comments, but could be he brings up these issues over here. Could be he brings up these issues. Let me just see if he. he has a comment on this. 86. Rabbeinu Mefarsh Pasuk al derech masher nimtzu biru Ralbag is in Nehemiah. So Yisira Olas even Bavaz Beis Avos L'nei Ha'am V'Som Shacholku Techel Anshei HaBayit Beis Av Shaloso Hayom Zeh Sheish Echad Mehem Lakut Meneh Yaduam Chen Yisira Olas even Bavaz Beis Avos L'nei Ha'am Lakriv LaHashem. I don't know. I don't understand exactly what Rabbi Yosef is writing. He does have a problem, but he doesn't exactly raise the problem we're raising. So
I think he's talking about something else, what I can understand.
Yeah. He's got a problem here with Reb Yaakov, but I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's a little bit different than what we're saying. But in any event, that is the one that's most difficult for Reb Yaakov. I think the one, if I remember, there's one in Ezra that is not so difficult. It does talk about, I think, the Korban Pesach, and it's easier to learn that particular one. I don't remember where it is exactly, but I remember. I don't know where Reb Yaakov doesn't bring it, but he doesn't bring it. Over here, certainly does bring it. I'll have to check and say for Ezra if he brings it. But then Reb Yaakov goes on to say something very interesting here. Reb Yaakov says he takes upon himself a very interesting idea. He says that Pesach was a chagiga le'umi, and therefore it's shaykh to the king. And he says something very interesting. He says like this: the new paragraph on Tofayim Beis on the right side. According to what I wrote, that Sefer Dvarim Sefer HaMelech, yesh levar shebe'emes chag haPesach nehafach lios inyan malchuti medinoti. It's a matter of kingdom and a matter of country, right? Ki ha'ma'ayim b'mkros yirish harbe shonim lo keimu yikaimu Yisrael et mitzvahs haPesach elam kein nitztavel uzal yidei echad me'amalachim. In other words, if you look in Divrei Hayomim and in Sefer Malachim, the Jews were not makayim the Pesach unless the king commanded. Ayin l'kamon lamed aleph. Vayishlach Chizkiyo al Kol Yisrael v'Yehuda v'gam Igros Kosav al Ephraim u'Menashe. You know, in the beginning of the Malchus of Chizkiyo, the 10 tribes were still there. So he wrote letters to Yehuda and to Ephraim and Menashe, the 10 tribes. Levo lebeis Hashem Yerushalayim lasos Pesach l'Hashem l'Elokei Yisrael. V'sham pasuk beis. He didn't make the Pesach in the first month. In Nisan, he made it in the year because people were not ready for it yet. They weren't all pure. V'od v'lo nasa Pesach kamo b'Yisrael mimei Shmuel hanavi v'chol malchei Yisrael lo osu k'Pesach hashoso Yoshio. Take a look what it says. There wasn't a Pesach like this in Israel from the time of Shmuel, and all the malchei Yisrael lo osu Pesach hasher osu Yoshio. They didn't make a Pesach that Yoshio made. Harei shemadgish hanavi harbe pamim in all these psukim as hakesher be'melech u'mitzvos haPesach. It became a Chag HaMelucha and La'om, right? And them came before Hativ Madu and Niska Sefer Moshe, Bekesher Chag HaPesach. That's why Sefer Moshe is mentioned here, Benegei L'Chag HaPesach, in the Ba'er Sefer Dvarim Sefer HaMelucha V'do Keter. But Reb Yaakov here is saying something very interesting. He's saying, why did it have to say Kakosav b'Sefer Moshe? It should have said what the Jewish people did without telling me a reference, right? Why does it give me a reference over here? So he says the fact that they're referencing Pesach to Sefer Moshe, that's where the Melech got the idea that it's incumbent upon me to make sure the Jewish people do the Pesach. Rabbi Yaakov saying, if you're saying Sefer Dvarim is Sefer Dvarim is Sefer Moshe, and it's made for the kings to how they should implement things for the nation, right? The social things, the Leumi things. He says it makes a lot of sense why the kings took achrayas for Pesach. No, it's for the Pesach of Chizkiyo, the Pesach of Yoshio. Why did the kings take achrayas? What's their achrayas? It's the Beis Din's achrayas. It's the people's achrayas to do, like sukkahs. It's the people's achrayas to do a sukkah, right? It's to go do the shalosh regalim. So why by Pesach do we have this idea that the king took achrayas for the Pesach? He says, well, if you learn that anything in Sefer Dvarim is shaykh to the king, Pesach is listed in Sefer Dvarim, even though it's listed in Sefer Shmos also, and in Vayikra, but it's listed in Sefer Dvarim. So the king understood that he has an achrayas to make sure that the Jewish people do Pesach and not the Beis Din. And that's why Pesach is such an important thing for the kings. So he says, now you haven't answered why, because it's a problem. Why are the kings making Pesach here? Why aren't they making sukkahs? Why did they decide to make Pesach? He says, because Pesach is not listed in Sefer Dvarim, and the other ones are not listed in Sefer Dvarim. That's what he says. Okay, so that's what Reb Yaakov basically says. He keeps going on with some other things as well, but that's what I would like to leave. I'd like to start another piece, which
Shurin?
Yes.
I just want to mention. I just read ahead a little bit. I mean, it's worthy of mention that in the next paragraph he says that's why there's an exclusive law of Pesach, unlike other korbanot, that ben nechar lo yochal bo.
Right.
And he says that a mumer cannot offer a korban, but he can eat from a korban. But he says, but the korban Pesach, a mumer cannot eat from the korban Pesach. In other words, it's another aspect of the national aspect. This is how you identify as being part of the Jewish people, is by eating the korban Pesach.
Right. So the Torah has to tell us a chiddush. Rabbi Yaakov says that kol nechar lo yochal bo, kol ben nechar lo yochal bo, because I would think that the Pesach he's really allowed to eat in it, like the other korbanos, especially because it's a leumi thing. So everybody's included in the Seder. You even have the Rasha, right, Wayne? In the Seder, you even have the Rasha. But he says the Torah has to tell us, therefore, Lefikach pasalto a Torah bachilosa. The Torah had to be pasul him. Well, he doesn't say why. He doesn't say exactly why the Torah pasels him, right? But Rabbi Yosef brings out over here, therefore the Torah passes, so you wouldn't come to include him in the bringing of the Pesach, because you would think that everybody's part of Pesach, even if you're a mummer. He says no, if you're a mummer, you're not part of Pesach. But okay, Rabbi Yaakov has a lot of stuff. He continues on for a couple of pages about this, but that's the yesod that Rabbi Yaakov is bringing. I would like to begin. Maybe we'll just begin with the question this week. It's going to be relevant to the parsha of the week as well. Rabbi Yaakov says something in three places. He says it in Shmos, he says it in Sefer Shmuel, and he says it in Sefer Chagai. Okay? He says an interesting chiddush. The piece on Sefer Shmos, I heard him say in the white shul in the Five Towns. I don't know if you know something called the White Shul in the Five Towns in Long Island. Probably Michael davened there already once or twice. No, never. You never went, because a lot of your students who live in the Five Towns, probably their parents daven, and not in the Five Towns. I should say it's in one of the Five Towns. It's in Lawrence. It's on the border of Lawrence and Far Rockaway. It's mamish on the border. Okay, so Reb Yaakov spoke there in 1976, which is very interesting because Reb Yaakov spoke in Yiddish in 1976 to a modern Orthodox shul. Okay, this is completely, today it's not so modern Orthodox because the rabbi is a more Haredi guy. I forget his name, but he's very famous. This rabbi, a younger rabbi, probably in his 50s today, but he actually grew up in that shul. Feiner, I think his name is Rabbi Feiner.
Right. He lived in Rehavia for a little while.
Right. So Rabbi Feiner became a super duper rabbi there. He's a superstar, right? And it started getting more yeshivish. But when I remember that shul, it was completely modern Orthodox. There wasn't a black hat to be seen. Okay, knitted kippot, and that was it. Okay, and the Rav was a very famous rabbi. Again, I'm forgetting his name. He was a rabbi there forever. He was a Torah Vodas boy, a modern Orthodox rabbi. But of course, he was a Talmud of Reb Yaakov, maybe even a little before Reb Yaakov, but it overlapped a little bit. So Reb Yaakov was able to speak in the shul. Why did Reb Yaakov come to the White Shul? Because it was a wealthy shul, and he was trying to raise money for his son's yeshiva in Hewlett. There's a yeshiva called Torah Chaim, right? It has a high school too. I forget what it's called. Maybe the high school as well is called maybe Tiferes Yaakov. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but he tried to raise money for the yeshiva. The yeshiva was having monetary problems, and my uncle Binyamin asked him to come, right? So my uncle Binyamin called the rabbi of the shul, and he said, Reb Yaakov is willing to come speak. And of course, it was a big kavod, but everybody in the shul understood Yiddish. Reb Yaakov spoke Yiddish, and I saw everybody came over to him afterward. These were all kids of Holocaust survivors. They were, obviously, I was a kid, right? I was like maybe in my early 20s when Reb Yaakov, so maybe 22 I was, but the people in the shul were in their 40s and 50s, and either they were Holocaust survivors or their kids were Holocaust survivors, So they all understood Yiddish, and Reb Yaakov gave a drasha, which I just want to begin here on page Shin Hey in Chumash. I sent it to you today, Shin Hey. And the pasuk says over here that God told Moshe to come, him and the Ziknei Yisrael, to power of Melech Mitzrayim, and say, God said, right, that God called us. He said we should go out for 3 days in the desert and we should sacrifice to God. Okay? So Reb Yaakov raises a question that a lot of people raise. If I'm not mistaken, last week I saw Rabbi Sachs raises it. I wasn't so crazy about his answer. Rabbi Sachs raises it. L'chora, hadover matmiya. This is a wonder. Sheyavo Moshe v'yidaber b'shem Hashem mashalo al daito. Moshe should speak in the name of God what didn't dawn upon him. V'arei chotem Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes. Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom shakosef heiralav b'chol beisi ne'emanu hayitochin sheyishana. Moshe Rabbeinu comes and tells Paro, we're going for 3 days. Who are you trying to kid? You're not going for 3 days. You're going for good. Why are you saying to Paro you're going for 3 days? Okay? You have the question, but I have to explain it a little bit more because God tells him to say this, right? All the Arabs lie because they say Muhammad told us to lie, right? So, but it seems like Reb Yaakov was bothered with how could God tell Moshe to say such a thing? Chotamo emes. He's telling Moshe to lie, and how could Moshe not say to God, "How could I lie?" B'chol beisi de'emanu. Right? And I remember Reb Yaakov saying the following thing. I don't remember if he said it to the shul. I think he did, but I don't remember. But he said it to me. He said, if Moshe Rabbeinu lied about the 3 days going out of Egypt, maybe he lied about the Torah also. Right? Maybe the Torah that we have is not God's. It's Moshe's. Not just Sefer Devarim. All 4 volumes before that. He said it half jokingly, but he meant it. Reb Yaakov was a very Isha Emes, so he couldn't fathom that Moshe would say a lie. How is such a thing, right? So Reb Yaakov comes up with now I want you to know, Rabbi Sachs, if you look in the Torah tidbits of last week, and probably it's in one of his svarim, he gives a whole bunch of reasons why in this case you're allowed to lie. Reb Yaakov does not accept that. Moshe Rabbeinu did not lie. Okay? So what does it mean he did not lie? We'll have to hold off because it's going to take a little bit of while. We'll hold off till next week. But Reb Yaakov is going to come up with an answer that I never saw anybody say. Moshe Rabbeinu did not lie. The Jews were going to only leave for 3 days. But he's going to explain it. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll take it up next
Thanks very much, Mr. Koyach.
Okay, Shikoach.
Okay.
Be in touch.